We're going to be looking at switch statements, specifically with switch casing, and we're going to be looking at fall through and also default statements. So a switch statement is kind of like an if-else statement. In an if-else statement, if something happens, a certain block of code is executed. In a switch case statement, if a specific case is met, that block of code will execute. And it's nice if you have a bunch of statements that you have to do, you'd put it in here. Otherwise, you would want to use an if-else statement. Also, a switch case only takes a specific type of input and compares it to the others. So if you have if-else statements, you can have different kinds of inputs. You can compare different things. But with a switch statement, you take a specific case, a specific integer, double, string, whatever, and then you can compare it to the different cases. So we can start coding it so it makes a little bit more sense. When we start out with a switch statement, we first start out with switch. It takes a parameter. This parameter needs to be initialized, declared initialized beforehand. We're going to start off with ints and then we'll move to strings next. So we'll do int and we'll call this val for value. And we're going to set it equal to, let's just say 7 right now, right? So we can go in here and we're going to take val as a parameter. Then we need brackets to encase this. Now is when our casing needs to come in. Our casing, there's no order for it. You can list it however. So we're going to just start off with case. We'll start off with case 2 and then we'll go to case 1 just to demonstrate that. So if we're using integers, we write out whatever it's going to be right here. Then we are going to do a colon like this, and then we're going to come inside of here. Inside of here, we are just going to have whatever we want to execute. So for this example, we'll just keep it simple and have a sysout statement where we print this is 2. Now after a case, you want to have a break. So you have break and then a semicolon like this. And that will end this specific case right here. Now, if we were to do this, and let's say we did it for these cases, but also we can't have repeating cases, so we'll just change this to be step 3, and we'll change this to be case 4. So we're going to do like this will be 3, and this will be 4. Now, if we didn't have a break in here, this is where our fall through would happen. And fall through is basically where if our value was 3, we would go into this case statement, we would execute this, and since there's no break, we're going to keep executing code until we hit a break. We can see that case 4 has a break in it, so we would fall into case 4 and hit this break. But if this case 4 didn't have a break in it, and we just deleted that, and we have a case 5 down here, it would do 3, 4, 5, and then break at this 5. So that is how fall through would work. But generally, we will not deal with fall through. We don't want fall through, so it's good to put breaks after each of these. So that's how the switch and the different casing will work. It's just all of this right here. Last thing to cover is the default statement. And for default, it's kind of like another case, but it's the total case. You can think of it like an else statement. So you type in default, you have your colon right here, and then after that, you would execute whatever code you want. So we'll just do sysout, and we will say this is default. And basically everything else that's not 2, 3, 4, or 5 is going to be caught inside of this print, and we're just going to print the default. And then after this, we should have a break. And so that is it for this switch statement. Now remember, it's again like an if-else statement. I like to implement this in like menus. So if we were to put this in a while loop, we would run this until the user quits. So we could have like case 0 right here, and then we will say sysout, and then inside of here we'll say you have quit. So once that's quit, we're going to exit out of this while loop that we need to make. So I'm going to indent this so we can surround it with a while loop. We'll run this as long as, and we'll say stop is equal to false. This means we have to declare an initialized stop to be false. So we will do boolean stop is equal to false, and boolean is just true or false. And then inside of our quit statement right here, inside of this block of code, we are going to set stop equal to true. That way it will eventually break out of this loop. Now we need a break right here, don't forget the break, otherwise it'll fall into the default statement, unless you want that, but you don't necessarily want that for here. So we need to bracket off this while loop, and now we have our loop. All we need now to do the menu example is to take user input. So we're going to use a scanner. We'll do scanner, we'll call it input and set it equal to a new scanner, where we are taking system.in for the user input. Hover over scanner, click import, and remember this has to be in our while loop, and I'll show why it has to be in the while loop. And now we're going to do a sysout where we just prompt the user. We'll say please enter a number, and so we can run this, and it's going to keep on running forever, and that's because we don't have another line that will store the user input. So we can come down here and we're going to set our val equal to the inputs dot next int, and this is initialized to 3, but we're going to overwrite that in here. And this input, we have a resource leakage because we need to close this. We can close this when we're done with our code, and we're done with our code when we quit. So after stop is equal to true, we're going to use inputs.close to close our scanner for good practice. And so now we can run it. It's saying please enter a number. Well, let's enter the number, any number that's not on here. So 9 isn't on here. Then we should fall into our default statement, which we do. It loops back and it says please enter a number. If we enter 2, it'll print out 2. Same with 3, 4, and 5. Again, if we input a number that's not here, like 7, it will go into default. And if we do 0, which is right here, we should quit. Pressing enter, it says we have quit. We can't enter anything else inside of here. And that is it for the integer example. Now we could do this with characters, we can do this with strings. If we were to do this with like strings or characters though, all we would have to do is I'll just make a string and I'll call this temp so we can see the difference, and I'll initialize it like this. And then instead of val, we're going to want to take temp. Now we can see that we are not having integer cases anymore. So we're going to have to make these into strings. So we could do like 2, and if the user inputs 2, this will happen. Same thing with here, we will do 3. Remember, numbers can be strings too, they just won't be integers. So we can make 4 like this, we can make 5 like this, and then this we could just make 0 like this. And so the user will now have to input this. We're going to have to take the user input. We'll set temp equal to inputs dot next, and this will get the next string. We will run it. We need to enter, it says enter a number because of our prompt right here, but we could change that easily. I'm just going to keep going. So if we enter the string 2, it should take us to case 2, which it does not, and that is because I don't think that I ran it correctly. Oh, that's because we have this val right here, and it's waiting for another integer. So it wants us to input a string, which it's going to store right here, and then it's waiting for another integer. So instead what we can do is just comment this out because we don't want to input an integer. We'll run it again. We'll input 2, this is 2, 3, and then if we want to quit, we will do 0. And just to demonstrate that little quirk right there, if we delete this, run it again, we do 2, and then we enter like the number 5. This 5 has no meaning because we're just storing it in here. We don't use it inside of here. It was just waiting for us to enter a value. So that's how that works. The reason why scanner has to be inside of here is because when I was testing this earlier and we were to take it out and put it like out here and we were to run this, and if we enter something that's not in here, something bad would happen. But that's going to be in the other video linked below the like button in the playlist about how to use the try catch.